Hey there, guys. Uh, I'm starting this right on time today. Yesterday, I had a few technical issues with the microphone and the sound that it went mute at some point. So I will need a feedback from you if that happens today, okay? So I'll keep the chat here active all the time so I can see what's going on. Uh, Please let me know if this happens at some point. This is part of a course on machine learning and data science. So during this COVID outbreak, I'm hosting this the live broadcasts on Mondays and Wednesdays. I'm doing it in Portuguese for Brazilians on problem solving and computational thinking. And now I'm doing this uh, on Tuesdays and Thursdays at this time for anyone in the world who wants to watch it. And on Tuesdays it's on data science, on Thursdays it's on machine learning. So I've been targeting an audience that is very specific. It's people who don't know how to code. And I've been doing that with all of my courses mostly. But what I've learned is that when I focus on this kind of audience, people who already code usually find it interesting because they learn things in a way that they were not used to. So I'm focusing on very high level approaches here. And you could think, okay, so if you're talking about people who don't know how to code, we're going to be using graphical interface software application. That's not the case. I also encourage you to use graphical applications, but what I found out is that people who start on graphical application based softwares, they basically want to dive into command line interface things like Pandas, which is what we're going to use here. So we're going to be using Python and Pandas. There's another tutorial that is available on my webpage, on my YouTube channel. So if you go to YouTube, you find here my channel, just so you can see it. So, okay, so I think that's where it all started failing last time. So let me not open YouTube because I think it might be some bug in YouTube that it streaming and showing a video at the same time gives some problem. In case that's the case, I'll just avoid that. So you can go to the YouTube channel. You're gonna find there the first lesson on data science, which was the first steps with Pandas, right? And here what I'm showing you is that this is my GitHub repository. It hosts all of these courses that I'm running. So it's many courses, but they're grouped into main topics. So they're like the repositories that we're going to be using today. Pandas 0, which is about using Pandas, learning Pandas, particularly for people who don't know how to code. DS0 is Data Science 0. So Pandas 0 is almost completely translated to English. Data Science 0 is not. And it's basically a series of Medium posts that students have been making, that they have been creating on data science topics. So my goal here was just to supervise what they were doing. In Pandas 0, I have reviewed and rewritten a lot in the contents. So even though the students created it, it has become really mature and it's getting even better. And on Thursdays, we're going to be talking about Scikit 0. So Pandas is probably the most used data science library by the Pandas community, which is likely the largest data science community in the world. And scikit-learn is probably the most used machine learning library. So Pandas and scikit-learn will be a good start for you, especially because in Pandas we don't cover only Pandas. We cover some visualization libraries that are very interesting, like Seaborn and Plotly. So there are some very nice things that you can learn here. Let me dive into, the other repositories are in computational thinking and problem solving, but right now they're only in Portuguese. So I'm not going to address them here, okay? So Pandas 0 is already almost fully translated. Scikit 0 is starting. It's been created as on demand because on Thursdays I'm needing to broadcast them, and they're already being created in English. Later they'll be translated to English to Portuguese if you're ever interested on that, okay? Well, Pandas 0, let me go here. So it's basically the idea of data science if you don't code. And then there's an English version here that you can follow through this link. And as I was talking about before, you could use a graphical user interface application like Orange 3. It's really nice. You can do a lot of things here, even spreadsheets. Spreadsheet applications can go a long way until you reach a point where you say, okay, now I need more power. I need tools that I don't find here. So in a sense, if you're able to understand the basics in spreadsheets, you already understand a lot of what you're going to be doing in data science. Because the concepts are the same, like the descriptive statistics is always there, different kinds of plots are all there, the idea of what is a series, what is a tabular data, all these concepts are already, you already get familiarized with them when you're using spreadsheets, right? But you can go much further, and Orange 3 is an option because you can do a bit of data science and you can even go into machine learning. So I know they're a complement, so when I speak about data science and machine learning, don't see as I'm talking them about like they're separate worlds. Machine learning plays a key role in the data science process, but here I'm trying to isolate things because of the courses that are isolated. So one is is the sequel of the previous one. Even here in this data science course, if we get the time to cover that, we could get all the way to unsupervised learning, but it will not. If that happens, it's not going to be using Pandas 0 because Pandas will not be the tool for doing unsupervised learning. We would go either to Orange 3 or to scikit-learn. Anyway, so we're going to be using Python. Here we're going to be using Pandas. So all of these tutorials here, they have been created by different students. So basically they were assignments in the course that I ran. But I tried to review all of them. And here you're starting to see two names because it's the guys who are translating them to English. Okay, so they've been extensively reviewed, so there should be no problems. But if you find any problems, you can report them. Okay, so let's go for the second lesson. The first lesson is available on YouTube. It was a live that I broadcast last week, and this week we're running these data frames as databases. So let's see what's going on here. When you click on the badge, it's going to launch Colab. If you missed the previous lesson, Colab is an environment that is interactive. You can see something graphically, but you can still do command line interface. So you write some code and it runs. And then the question always pops out. So if we're writing code, are we not coding? Yeah, big question there. The thing is, you're not going to need any programming logic that requires what can I say? If there is, they require conditionals or loops or how to define procedures or even more advanced things, right? So you're only gonna be doing what we call command line interface, which is simple commands that you write so that you can have the program execute what you want it to do. But the logic is very simple. So it doesn't require you to be an expert in programming. Of course, if you program, you can dive much deeper, but it's what I told you before. When we start from this perspective, we start seeing how to do things in a way that you look and you say, dude, I didn't know I could do it that way, and it's much simpler than I have been doing it before. So let's hope that this is enough, okay? Well, so Colab, I connected for the first time because this notebook, as we call it, is going to run on a Google computer, whatever that is. The thing is that about data privacy, people are always asking. So don't worry about data privacy because, well, Google will have access to something. That's a different story. But other people running on the same machines will not have access to your code and data and vice versa. And I said this about Google, but I have to check the terms and conditions. I didn't check. What I'm sure is that other people are not able to see what you're doing because your notebook runs in what we call a container. A container is like a computer, like a whole computer, but it's just a box. So it's an app that is running inside a computer. A single computer can host multiple containers. So codes from many different people are running at the same time, but you never get to see other people's codes because you're in a box. We call it a sandbox or a container, okay? Well, last tutorial we saw how to connect Colab to Google Drive so that the data that we have here doesn't get lost. because we're connecting to something that is temporary, the data is going to get lost. But if we connect it, if we connect Colab to Google Drive, the things get persisted, right? They keep being there even when you stop running your Colab. Here's another approach. If it's something that you don't really need to store anywhere because it's already provided in a website, and of course you have to be sure that the website is not coming down in the near future, you can just download it with wget. Okay, so we're talking about machines. We're talking about machines that run in Google computers, and Google computers run Linux. So you don't need to know anything about Linux, but one thing that it would be useful for you to know is that these cells can run Linux code too, not only Python code. And there are different ways to do that, but the simplest is you just start the command with an exclamation point. Okay, so when you do this, you can say, for instance, run this program called wget, which means get it from the web, and I can give you a link of a data set that I want to use, right? So I'm going to get this link. It comes from the university's open data project. So my university is called UFRN, so UFRN, and the file I'm going to get it is this one. It has this big link, but I got it navigating through the university's website, so I can show you. The website is this, and when I navigate here, okay, it's in Portuguese, but when I navigate to the right place, I can find that data set, right? So this is the data set, and it has a CSV option here that I can copy as a link, and that's what I did. Okay, so while it's loading there, I got the link, and here I'm gonna say, please download this for me. And then the first time you run a code cell in a Colab that you didn't author, in this case you're just running it from GitHub, Google is always going to tell you, well, this was not authored by Google, please be sure of what you're doing. Yep, I am. So I'm running this, and then it's trying to download the data from the university. It's downloaded, and now if I click on refresh here, I see that the file is there. Okay, so I can, as we've seen it before, I can just load the dataset using Pandas. So this time I'm going to import Pandas as PD. What does that mean? It means that I'm associating a name to Pandas. So every time I'm using something that comes from Pandas, I have to explicitly say PD dot something. So we were using the method read CSV. Now we're saying PD dot read CSV. That's going to be helpful when you start using many libraries, and in data science you use a lot, in Python you use a lot of libraries. So it's interesting to know where things are coming from. So it's a convention, really. In the beginning I didn't like it, but I followed the convention. Now I'm kind of getting convinced that this could be useful, so you really understand where this is coming from, right? So I'm going to read it. Since it's a Brazilian data set, the fields were separated using a semicolon instead of comma. So let me read it, and here's the data, right? So everything is in Portuguese again, as we discussed before. Let me see if I can help you. I need this to be understandable, so I'm going to translate this in a minute, right, as much as I can. But first to start, let's talk about how do we carry, I never know if it's carry or query. Sorry, I'm going to be using carry from here on. If it's wrong, later I'm going to say, sorry, I regret this. But anyway, I never know how to carry a data frame. So, sorry, I never know how to speak carry. Well, we already have our data frame ready for carrying, right? The simplest form we have is what we call indexing and slicing. And what's indexing? Well, every data frame will have an index. And we can see, of course, there's a big discussion here that people will try to see, tend to see index as when we do this. Let me show you here. In general, people will say, okay, this is the index, and they're going to be looking at the index of the rows. But truth be told, the first level of indexing in a data frame is columns, and columns represent features. Okay, so when I ask for these, the output is a bit verbose, but what I need is this. these are the names of the columns, right? So how do I access the names of the columns? Well, the first thing we can do here is that I can replace them for something else. So I'm going to translate all of the fields so they start making sense. So ID, student name, gender, start year, semester, and type, student type, status, and then course ID, name, type. You see that there are some things that might be confusing and you might be wondering, what exactly is this? That's where a data dictionary comes into play, and it's really important. Unfortunately, almost never you can find a data dictionary that is really prepared so you can understand the context. Still, here you could find it, so I'm not gonna open it because it's in Portuguese, but the main idea is that we're gonna just take a few examples here so you understand what we're talking about, right? So let me run this out to translate. So I'm saying now the columns are gonna be defined by this list. So you notice that I have to preserve the order, right? So this matrícula here refers to ID. This nome docente refers to student name. It has to keep an order, okay? So each column is a series, and we discussed this in the previous broadcast. So let's see here. If I do this, like if I use the brackets and I put the name of the column inside, then I can access the series. And when I say dot head, we had discussed this for a data frame. So for a data frame, it would be like this. And I could see the first 5 observations, 5 samples in the data frame. If I do this, I'm saying I only want to access this series. So give me the first 5 values in that series, okay? And then the first 5 values are this. It's also possible to access the features using this notation that I say dot, and I use the name directly without using brackets or codes. And then we're gonna see the last 5 unit names here. But the thing is, never do that, please, because unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, many of the datasets that we find in the internet will have names that were conceived for readability, right? And in principle, that's bad because you want names that computers can understand. But sometimes that saves your life because you don't find a data dictionary. So if the name of the column is at least a bit understandable, that already helped you. Whatever the case, whether you're pro or con, these kind of things, we're gonna be more safe. We're gonna be safer if we play it like this. Okay, always use the brackets and the square brackets and the name of the feature in codes. Okay, the data in a series is also indexed. As I said, the level that people usually think of when you're talking about indexing is rows, right? Samples. But before that comes the columns. So when you have selected a column, you have selected a series, then yes, you can go for rows. And you can see that the first one is this. So here you see that he was the first one. Yep, he is the first one. Remembering that in computer science languages, in computer science programming languages, indexing starts at 0. That's almost always the case. If that's not the case for some language you're using, I have a very bad feeling about this. Well, so you could do that directly too. So the first level of indexing is telling me to get this column. The second level of indexing is telling me to get the first value in that column. Okay, the first value in that series. And this notation also works. Here we have so many methods that we can discard some that are not going to help us. So when I want to drop methods, I can use this method here, drop. When I want to drop some columns, some features. And then I have to give one or more features. If I want to give more than one, I have to provide a list of features, okay? Remembering that the notation for a list is square brackets, all the things you want, and they're separated by commas, okay? Usually, the axis will be away. So when you're dropping, Pandas will think that you're trying to drop rows. So that's the default definition. X is equals 0. If I don't say anything, that's what he thinks. And he's going to try to drop rows, drop samples, right? But when I do these, I'm saying, no, I want to drop features, and I'm being specific. Many times there's going to be this option in Pandas, and the default version is for rows, for samples. If you want to do it for features, for columns, you have to say axis equals 1. And then, because Pandas is always producing a copy, I'm just going to say, please, take that copy and associate the name data to it. So in this way, data is now going to be referring to whatever I do to this version here, which was the original copy. Okay, let's see what happens. So now I lost those fields. You look for student type here, it's not going to be anywhere. Okay. Sorry, for some reason I have 2 cells here. Maybe it's because I don't like to keep things that close. Okay. We can translate feature values if they're categorical. So why would you do that? So sometimes you're going to take data sets that they're not very understandable because you got it from somewhere else, some other country. And here you're talking about languages that are still not very difficult to follow because at least the alphabet is the same. But think of data sets that you get from people from places that use different alphabets. It becomes very difficult to follow if you don't understand that language, if you don't know those characters, right? So my suggestion here is that if you get to those situations and you know how to translate them, please do, because other people will thank you a lot for that, as long as, of course, the translation is done correctly. So here what I'm going to talk about is about categorical issues, so categorical features. So I don't know if you remember from the discussion we had in the previous broadcast, feature can be numerical or categorical. Usually in terms of numerical features, you're talking about things that you can measure or you can count. And in terms of categorical features, you're talking about things that they're just properties, right? They're qualitative data. That's not 100% true if you go a bit deeper, because inside categorical data you could have ordinal data, but we're going to make it simpler for now just so you understand this part, and we can go back to the discussion a bit later when we come to that, okay? Or you can go back to the previous broadcast and see what was going on there. Well, so let me run this and explain what happens. In the previous broadcast we have discussed this. So I'm saying I want to take this series, I want it to be interpreted as being of a type called category, and whatever comes out of these I want to associate to data status, right? So the status is going to be this from now on. Now if I try to see the unique values here, I can see that I have categories. There are 7 categories. They're all of type object, which is what Pandas uses for text, for nominal features. So there are 7 here. You probably are not understanding what they mean. So I'm going to translate them to you. How do I translate? Well, now it's a categorical feature, right? So I can say take this feature, take this series, and use a special property of categorical types, and I access this saying .cat, which is the method rename categories. And now the same way I had a list here that said my categories, here I'm going to provide another list that are the translations of those categories, because it's going to replace each of these values for its corresponding translation. Okay, so let me run this. Remember that the order is important here. And now when I see here the column status, it said finished, cancelled, cancelled. And of course these values here, cancelled, suspended, registered, they don't need to mean much to you, as they don't mean much to me. And I'm even working and studying at the university. But the reason why they don't mean much to me is what I told you. You need to understand the specific context you're talking about. So usually the data dictionary is the place to go. If you don't have a good data dictionary, you still have to knock on doors or mail people or call people and say, hey, I'm trying to understand this data set to make something useful out of it, but you need to help me. And that's usually when people will slam the door in your face. But still, it's a thing we keep trying to do, okay? We know that we could translate other features using the same approach. But that's not the point of the notebook. That's interesting that I show you how it works, but I'm not going to keep the whole notebook around the idea of translating things into English. If that were the point, we would be just using an English, originally in English dataset, right? Now we were talking about indexing, and we did direct indexing, but we can index also through lock and iLock. These are methods that are going to help us access the data. So instead of doing the indexing for columns and then doing the indexing for the samples, what we're going to do is that we're going to index at the same time, and we're going to separate what is meant to index the sample as the first thing, the first element, then comma, then the reference for the second element, which would be the column, right, the feature. So I want observation 0 from feature student name. You remember the name of the guy? Yeah, it's the same guy again, right? So now this is equivalent to what we were doing before. Oh, sorry. This is equivalent to what we were doing before, which was this student name, and then I did 0. And this is important that I mention this because, I mean, for people who don't code, you've never seen these kind of things before, you may find this a bit weird, but this is the first time you're seeing this. Now, for people who code, they've been doing this for their whole lives. And they come here and they want to do this. So what they want to do is this. That's not how it works in Dataframes, right? Because in Dataframes, columns take precedence over features. So if you do this, as I usually try to do, it doesn't work. What you have to do is this, okay? Or this. I also tried to do before it is to try to do this. So this is something that other languages will accept. Well, Pandas won't. Pandas will ask you to use the lock method specifically, okay? Well, so when you use lock, we're talking about the names of the indices and the names of the features, right? But we could also use, and you're gonna say, oh, but you're using 0 here. Yeah, because in this case the index is numerical, and there's one sample that is referred to as being index 0, right? But if I wanted to get, if we were talking about, let's say, strings as the indices on the samples, I would have to do the same thing I'm doing here for the features. And we're going to see these examples in the future, right? But if I really want to use numbers to say the first, the second, and so on, I have to use iLock, okay? So iLock is telling me, give me the first one for the second series, right? The first sample for the second, from the second series. And then it's exactly this one. So you might be thinking I'm making a mistake because I'm saying 1 and it's the second. But remember what I told you, it's 0 base, so 1 is the second, okay? So I could also provide a list of features. So if I use lock, I say I want to get these two here, and then I'm going to get these two features for index, which is for row, for sample whose index is 0, okay? Of course, the corresponding thing would also work. So 1, 3, and 7. I want the second, the fourth, and the eighth samples from the second series. Okay. So you see the indices here. They match in this case, but it's a big coincidence, right? You're gonna see in the future that these are not necessarily the same things. You could have very different values here, and they could still be the second, the fourth, and the eighth samples. Well, that was indexing. Usually what I do at this point is that I go back to the chat and I see if there's anyone interested in asking some question. So there's a bit of a delay, some latency in the streaming. So every time I speak and I want you to provide some feedback, I have to wait like 15 seconds for you to really listen to what I was saying. So I'm gonna let you hear to this, send any messages you want to send as feedback, and after that we'll move on to the next part, which is slicing, okay? Well, in the meantime, while you write your comments, I'm just gonna do this. Slicing is very brief, so I'm gonna do slicing. You write the questions that you have there, and I go back, okay? And then I'll stop because we'll go for like a database queries. I'm pretty sure it's queries. I'm gonna regret this broadcast later. Anyway, so slicing is when you want to get a block instead of just one value. And you're going to say, yeah, but here you're getting multiple values. You were, but they were not sequential. Like it's the second, the first, the seventh. It happened here that this was two in a row. Like they were, I think they're originally together, right? Let's see. No, they're not. So student name and course name. So yeah. So slicing is when I say I want to take all of the samples, all of the values for these samples, for this block of samples, or this block of features. Okay, so I say I want all the samples from 0 to 500, all the sample values for these feature here, student name. So I'm gonna get 500 samples here. No, 501. And the reason is that log will consider that I'm gonna take 0 and also 500. If you're already familiar with coding, that's not common. That only happens for log. And I tried to argue for log here in the bottom, but I don't like it very much. That the behavior is like this. I'll show you what happens down there. For ilog, that doesn't happen. So for ilog, if I say 0 to 5, it means 5 samples. 5 to 8, it means 3 features. So features 5, 6, and the 6th, the 7th, and the 8th feature are going to be provided. Okay, so I want the 5 first values in those series. And in the case of log, I was saying that they include the last one. There's only one thing I can think of why they would do this, is because when you're talking about names, you don't have, that's why. It's because you wouldn't have a name to say as the last one if you wanted to get the last one. So here what you do is that I want to get the last one. I give you a number that is higher, that it's greater than the number of things that I have there. So if I have, let's say, 500 elements here, and I want to get number 500, this last part here would be 500, so that it goes until 499. But when we are talking about this, about the labels, there is nothing else I could provide here. So they would have to come up with something a bit artificial, like just give me this, like an empty feature. I don't know. Anyway, they chose this path. Now it makes sense to me that it's a reasonable path. But in the beginning you find it very strange, because if you're used to coding, you know that every time you want to know how many samples you're getting, how many results you're getting from this kind of query, it's like the second value minus the first one, so it should be 500, and here you get 501. Here you see that it really works, right? 5 minus 0, 5. 8 minus 5, 3. Yep, that always works. Well, so let me see if there are some questions in the chat. So far nothing, that's nice. Well, we never know if it's nice, right? You never know if people are lost or if people are understanding. But anyway, if you're lost, please say something, because I really want to try to help you. Sorry guys. Fortunately, computers will not help spread COVID. And I don't have, it's just that I have allergies. I've been having them all my life. That's just one more day in paradise. Oh, queries just like done in database development. So if you have ever worked with databases, and that might have happened in many different ways, so you don't need to code to have worked with databases before. But what we generally try to do is that in computer science we define these as two operations. Selection means you're getting a subset of samples. Projection means you're getting a subset of features. Okay, so if I want to filter with just some features, I could use filter like this, and then I provide this argument here, like equals start. I'm saying every feature that has start in its name, I want to get them. So let's see what comes up here. There are 3 features that have start. By a coincidence here, they all start with the name start, but that was not intentional, right? And that's not necessary. So start year, start semester, start type. Let's go for the next thing. I can, well, this result is a data frame. So every time you're making a query, you get a data frame as output. Okay. So let's do this. I will filter by this, and I'm gonna associate with a data frame. I'm gonna call with a name. I'm gonna call start date. That's how I'm gonna refer to this data frame. And I wanna see the first 5 samples. Okay. So that's what I get. You can also do conditional searching, right? So let's start with something very simple. I can say start type equals reingresso segundo ciclo, right? And here there are different notations you could adopt. What I like to do to be sure that this is working is this. So if you remove the quotes, you should see some code that is highlighted in a way that makes sense in Python. And what we're asking here is, okay, please check for the feature start type, which is this one, the ones that match this value here. Okay. Well, I don't understand this value. No problem. In this case, it wouldn't be easy to translate it, because even if I translate, it's something that is specific to the university. So that's why I didn't bother translating it. Okay. So we use these 2 equal signs to refer to equality. So I want this to be equal to this. Every time, so Carrie will do this. Every time I am iterating over the samples, I look at the value for feature start type, and that value matches what I'm asking. I'm going to return that sample. Okay, so all of this will not be there because they don't match. Okay, well, in the end, I always add the quotes because this is something that Carrie requires. So now, if you see here in this, for this feature, all the samples that were returned, they are from this type. Okay, well, let's see if we can see a bit more in the example. Yep, I think I've gone through all of this. Okay. Again, the output is a data frame, so I can use a name. We'll get a name, and the name is this data second cycle. So there are some issues with my connection, and apparently you're going to be experiencing buffering. First time this happens, I'm really sorry. Well, let's see how that turns out. And this is something that in Portuguese we call it second cycle. Okay, so we're going to call it data second cycle. So in a nutshell, it is that you take like a minor and a major. So the major will be the second cycle. That's the idea. So let's run this because I want to be able to refer to this output here. So let's check a bit of comparison operators. So we can use equal to, not equal, which would be the exclamation point and equal, and the equal sign. Less than, greater than, less than or equal to, you use the less than sign, and then the equal sign. Greater than or equal to is the opposite. And usually adopt these 4 here when you're talking about numerical data. They could make sense for non-numerical data, but that's something that's too specific to coding. I'm not going to go down that road now. Okay, so for us, equality and inequality will be applied to any kind of features. These ones we're going to be using for numerical features. Okay, now if we're trying to see when you're talking about categorical values, something that you can also use is the operator we call in. So what we do is this. So I want to get any of these status values here, right? So what I can say is this: please provide me all the samples for each the status are in this list here. So let me explain a bit the syntax here. This is again a string, right? The only thing I'm doing is that I'm adding this f before, because this is a bit simpler in Python to say I want you to take the object that is referred to by this name and place it here. So this is going to be processed. It's going to be equivalent to me pasting, copying here, wait, and pasting this here. And then the F goes away. This is what it would mean, okay? But I find it more readable to do it this way. Okay, so I say please, wherever you see brackets inside a string that is preceded by an F, it's going to be replaced by the object to which that name is referring. So in this case, this. So what I'm saying is this, please go take all the samples for each. The value for feature status is one of these two options here. Okay, so let me see. Can you see here? Cancelled, cancelled, cancelled. All the cancelled came. And I don't know where is it, tail instead of head. Let's see if I use head, if I can see some from the other type. Oh, they're almost all cancelled. No, not many people suspend. But I can check that this works if I do this. Let me just get this to say data status, right? Yeah. And I say unique, and I'll say what values are there. Because it's categorical, there it's showing me everything. So value counts. Sorry, I call it data status. So yeah, data status. Yeah, see, only cancelled and suspended. Now, just by chance, unique. Yeah, unique only shows the two categories that are there. Okay. So these are the status I wanted to filter. I was able to filter for that. There's some explanations here on like the idea of F strings, which are strings preceded by an F. And we can use the idea of logical operators, right? So if I have multiple conditions that I want the code to attend, the samples to attend to, I'm gonna do this using logical operators. I'm gonna be building logical expressions. So the first condition here is, let me just take this out so you can see. It's this, right? Start type equals second cycle. So, the second condition is, well, the course on the second cycle will have to be software engineering, which in Portuguese we call engenharia de software. Okay, so course name equals this. And what I do is, okay, I'll take the carry and I'll say, I want this condition. Remember, this will be replaced by whatever this is referring to, which in this case is this string. And the second condition, right? And then this is what comes after. If you know something about Python, you can basically write a logical expression here like you do in general code. So if I take off the quotes here, I would see that the end is showing blue because and is an operator, a logical operator in Python, and Pandas is kind of reusing it here, right? This is a big criticism I have on Pandas. I don't like this notation, but still, I'm trying to show you a way that we can cope with that. These are one of the many things in Pandas that is not very Pythonic, but still. So this way I would get all the students that are in the second cycle, and on the second cycle they have chosen software engineering. Okay, so let me see the output here. Yep, so second cycle, second cycle, second cycle, software engineering, software engineering, software engineering. Okay, so there's a bit of an explanation here if you thought this was too fast, and then you can see it a bit later. There's another logical operator which is called the OR operator. I forgot to say. The interpretation here is direct, right? This condition has to be true, and this condition has to be true. The AND assumes that it will only be satisfied if both sides of the expression are true. So it has to be second cycle, and it has to be software engineering. Now we're going to see the OR operator. And the thing about the OR operator is that you only need one of the sides of the equation true. So what we could do here is to say condition for the second cycle is start type second cycle. Condition for software engineering is course name software engineering. Condition for computer science is course name computer science. So now I'm saying I want all the second cycle courses all the students from the second cycle that are either taking software engineering or computer science. So the condition here would be condition computer science or condition software engineering, and the other condition is condition second cycle. So they have to be in the second cycle, and they can be computer science or software engineering, right? So here you can get a bit, how can I say, it could be a bit ambiguous on how you interpret this. So computers don't leave things to chance. The idea is that every time you have an AND in a logical expression, it will be evaluated before the OR. So if I put all these things in a single sentence, the AND is still going to be evaluated first, right? So that's why I don't do this here, because if I did it like this, the AND would take precedence, and I would be probably not getting what I wanted to get. So let's run this and see what happens. So, computer science, software engineering, computer science. So this is something I will check, but I'm pretty sure that I found a bug here that we have to fix later. Because if I take this condition here and I just paste it here, as this is what we will expect, this will not work. And I know why this bug is here, because I had done it a different way before, and now I'm doing it like this. And here it still works, because computer science students probably can only come from second cycle. I can check this, but the way this expression is written down here, and will be evaluated first, so it would say it has to be second cycle and computer science, or it could be just software engineering. I don't mind where it came from. So what we can look for to see if this really didn't work, and then I have to fix this, is if we have anyone from software engineering who didn't come from from the second cycle. Let's see if it's possible. I think in the university that could be possible. That's very specific, but anyway. So condition, so let's say let's get so start type, and let's check the value counts here. Yeah, well, in this case everybody came like this, but the way the condition is put down, that could not be the case. So it's better that I go back here and I fix this later. So how can I fix this? Well, what you can do is that you just add parentheses here, and now you're sure that these will be evaluated first and these will be evaluated second. Why? It's the same as in math. We know that when we put parentheses, whatever come in parentheses take precedence over what does not come in parentheses. So this should be how it's written, okay? And then just to finish up, I could invert that whole condition and say, now I want everybody except those guys. This is, in Portuguese, this is very easy to explain. In English, it would be even more, because then, the opposite is something is very easy to understand. In Portuguese, we have what we call anyway, this is easier in Portuguese if you make a joke than if you just say it like this, because the language implies something different from English. Well, let's see. So these guys would be these guys here. They're guys who were not from the second cycle and were not from those courses, right? So they're all the other guys. Anyway, it's been almost 1 hour broadcast. It usually takes a bit longer when I'm interacting and talking, but there were no questions asked this time. So I will wait a bit, because maybe someone started having questions closer to the end. One thing that I will admit is that this part on conditions and logical expressions, they generally require you to study a bit more. And then there's a lot of material there with Python 0. I was just yesterday on a broadcast explaining this. So if you go to Python 0, you're going to see an explanation. It's in Portuguese, so if you want to learn that in English, you could go to Code Academy. So it depends on what you're looking for. And it's not difficult. It's really not difficult. The idea is that you start with simple examples and you're gonna be building them up. And here you saw how to Google, how to check a bit on this. Okay, so thank you very much for coming, guys. And please, if you have any feedback, feel encouraged to make those questions. I'm gonna give you like 15 to 20 seconds to say something, because that's the latency here, the time it takes for you to listen to me, and then I will reply to the questions. Well, okay, no comments. That's all for today, guys. Please, when you leave the room, remember, be careful. We're talking about COVID, so stay safe, okay?